Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit DuluthNewsTribune.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
Hello, Northlanders. It's Tuesday, August 27th. I'm Wyatt Buckner of the Duluth News Tribune Minute, presented by Minnesota Power Employees Credit Union.
The average MPECU member saves over $785 a year in better rates and lower fees. And with MPECU, every ATM is your ATM. With their free checking program, you get ATM fee reimbursements at any ATM anywhere in the U.S. Check out Minnesota Power Employees Credit Union's services online at mpecu.com or visit their offices in downtown Duluth, Arrowhead Road, or Miller Trunk Highway.
Now here's a look at today's headlines. A 4th grade boy attending a concert on the pier performance at Glensheen Mansion with his family recently made a startling beachside discovery: bones. Mark Knutson, an attorney who has volunteered his services to represent the nonprofit Scandinavian Cemetery Association, acknowledged the recent exposure of human remains below the Scandia Cemetery at 3200 London Road. The find was reported to local authorities several days later at about 1:20 p.m. August 13th, according to Maddie Jelseth, a public information officer for the Duluth Police Department. She said local officers in turn notified the Minnesota State Archaeologist Office and the Midwest Medical Examiner's Office of the discovery, pulling them into the investigation. Neither agency responded to requests Friday from the News Tribune for information regarding the case. While the Scandia Cemetery is located next door to Glensheen, it is not related to or affiliated with its neighbor, said Lynn Williams, Chief Marketing and Public Relations Officer for the University of Minnesota Duluth, which owns and operates the historic mansion. She said the university learned of the concern and, in cooperation with its chief of police, contacted the city and the county. The city and county are still scrambling to respond. St. Louis County Communications Manager Dana Kazel asked the public to steer clear of the cemetery and the shoreline below it for the time being. Scandia Cemetery, one of Duluth's oldest designated resting places for the city's dead residents, is located just down the road from Glensheen, and erosion continues to encroach on lakeside graves. Knutson said the nonprofit that owns the cemetery lacks the resources to deal with the challenge. The total balance in its accounts amounts to less than $15,000. Scandia Cemetery has turned to St. Louis County for help, as Knutson notes local government officials have the authority to take over neglected cemeteries in its jurisdiction. By all accounts, the cost of either stabilizing the shoreline and or relocating imperiled graves is likely to be immense. Millions of dollars recently have gone into other less delicate shoreline reinforcement projects, as the frequency and severity of storms have taken an increasing toll on Duluth's waterfront. John Bredesen, 90, said his great-grandfather helped launch the cemetery. While the cemetery has since closed, except for the burial of family members on reserved sites, Bredesen said he still attends to having the property mowed and maintained. He remains somewhat skeptical that the recently discovered remains came from the Scandia Cemetery, suggesting that they most likely would have remained in a coffin and would not have been scattered loose as they were found. Bredesen also noted that most graves were set back at an adequate distance from the shoreline to resist erosion. Glensheen's marketing manager and 2nd District Duluth City Councilor Mike Mayo also noted that the cemetery predates the mansion and that no members of the Congdon family were interred at Scandia, but were instead laid to rest in Forest Hill Cemetery. Scandia Cemetery dates back to 1881, when it was established by members of the now defunct First Norwegian Danish Lutheran Church. The oldest known grave belongs to Jacob Adolf Carlson, a 9-year-old who died that same year. Bill Alexander isn't sure how many visits he's made to the International Handbill Symposium since he organized Strike Point in 1984. The longtime Duluth Handbell Choir director returned to Japan with Strike Point in August for the 21st International Handbell Symposium in Hamamatsu, Japan. His first international symposium, also in Japan, was back in 1986 with the 11-member choir. This year's symposium was a much different affair, held inside a large convention center with a special concert on the final day, which included one choir from every country represented at the symposium. Strike Point was asked to represent the United States, which Alexander said had happened before. One of the reasons for the high esteem, according to longtime member Nancy Eaton, is because Alexander was among the first handbill choir directors to direct and lead the group from within. He plays alongside the members and doesn't conduct out front. Alexander is preparing to retire from Strike Point at the end of August, a decision he said he'd struggled with for a while. Strike Point will begin to prepare for the upcoming holiday concert. Eaton said the group will continue to work with Alexander as they go. For a preview of an upcoming story, Dan Williamson joins us now with a special guest.
Thank you very much, Wyatt. I'm joined by one of our colleagues, Duluth News Tribune arts and entertainment reporter Jay Gabler. And Jay has a story that we'll be able to see in Wednesday's print edition of the Duluth News Tribune, as well as on our website before that at duluthnewstribune.com. And Jay, you told me a little bit about what this article is going to focus on. The question is, where does Duluth stand in America's divided summer economy? What more can you tell us?
Yeah, this started with an article that I read in the New York Times last month about the national phenomenon of what the New York Times described as America's divided summer economy. And this is specifically with respect to tourism. And the New York Times pointed out that among the tourist industry nationwide, you're seeing an increasing split between, at the high end, people who are financially comfortable are really feeling comfortable this season splurging on big budget travel items. And when they travel, they've got money to burn. They are ready to go for those bigger ticket items and really kind of have a lavish experience. And so people who are providing those more expensive experiences, products, what have you, are doing well. But then at the other end, people who are of more modest means, middle class, working class people, are perhaps feeling like they can't afford to travel at all. Or if they are traveling, they're really watching their wallet a little bit more closely in terms of how much they're spending than they had been in previous years. And I thought, boy, Duluth sure has a summer tourist economy. We've been seeing that all summer long, and it's a great economic boon to Duluth. But I wondered if we were seeing this phenomenon at all in Duluth, if this idea that America has a divided tourist economy is seen at all by people who run tourist-facing enterprises here in Duluth.
What did you find? What did you learn in covering this story?
I think the answer, Dan, is yes and no. And I knew going in it wasn't going to be a simple answer. So it's a long article. And if you want to read it, you'll have a good long read. And I didn't even really scratch the surface of how big a topic this is. Duluth is complicated. On the one hand, yes, we do have some higher end offerings. There's certainly those more expensive hotels that we all see down in the Canal Park area, things like helicopter rides, and just wherever you go in Duluth, there are those higher end experiences. Maybe you're going to take a train ride. Well, there's that next level of ticket where maybe you're sitting in the dome car or you're in some special kind of meal train or whatever. But at the same time, Duluth overall is seen as sort of a budget travel destination, that this might be the kind of place you would go if, say, you live in the Twin Cities and, well, you know, it's not going to happen to go to Disney World this year, but you can get to Duluth for a few days. So I knew the answer was going to be complicated in Duluth. So the yes part of that answer is that, sure enough, people who run local attractions are seeing there are more people coming in with that money to spend on the higher ticket items, whether that's people coming to Glen Sheen who are a little bit more ready than they used to be to say, oh, this tour costs more money, but I get to see more things and it's guided. I'll splurge for that, right? Or even if you're going to a free museum like the Karpelis Museum, well, that's free will donation. And the director of that museum said, on the one hand, he's seeing more people who choose not to donate because presumably they feel like as much as they appreciate the museum, they just don't have that, $5 to spare right now. They need to save that for, a malt down at the malt shop. But at the same time, he said, you're seeing more and more people who say, you know what? I'm going to drop a 20. This is not a hardship for me. This is a great museum. I'll support you at this level. So they are seeing that divided nature of tourist visitors.
So like you said, not necessarily a definitive answer, more complicated, if anything else.
More complicated. And the bigger question, and one that is certainly relevant for Duluth as it considers not just what businesses we have here in town, but how we market ourselves as a tourist destination, is how we strike that balance between attracting the people who might come to Duluth with more money, which is a good thing. We want people to spend money in Duluth. That's why it stays here in the community, creates local jobs, supports local artisans, businesses, museums, etc. That's all to the good. But it can be the case that when people come to town with more money to spend, they spend it on things, for example, like hotel rooms that might then make those hotel rooms a little bit less available or more expensive for people who might have been used to just driving into Duluth and maybe crashing for a weekend. And now are finding, whoa, those hotel bills are up. And well, The hotel bills are up for a number of reasons, but I get into all that in the article. As I mentioned, it is a complicated question, but I have to say I really appreciate the several people from tourist-facing businesses in Duluth, including the airport, Glen Sheen, the depot, and many more who really took time to dig into this complicated question with me. I think it makes for a fascinating thing to consider.
Absolutely. This should be a very interesting read. Jay, great stuff as always.
Thanks, Dan.
And again, you can read Jay's article in Wednesday's print edition of the Duluth News Tribune, as well as online prior at duluthnewstribune.com. Wyatt, back to you.
Thanks, Dan. Now here's a look at your forecast, brought from the News Tribune's Northlandia podcast.
Here's the forecast for the Duluth area on this Tuesday. Patchy fog and continuing rain and thunder chances persist across the Arrowhead region today, with afternoon highs stuck in the upper 60s. A few thunderstorms will remain possible through this evening before rain chances clear out heading into Wednesday. Breezy winds and partly sunny skies are expected for Wednesday then, with highs only in the mid-60s. Rain chances then return late Wednesday night into Thursday, with some thunderstorms possible into Thursday as well before we clear out into the holiday weekend. I'm Storm Tracker and meteorologist Robert Daly.
Thank you to the Northlandia podcast for their support. The bi-weekly podcast explores curious and unique stories here in the Northland. The latest episode explores the long-abandoned property home to over 1,000 buried pets. You can find that episode and others at duluthnewstribune.com or wherever you also get this podcast. Reporting for today's episode was done by Peter Passy, Terry Caddo, and Jay Gabler. Thank you for listening to Duluth News Tribune Minute. Have a great day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.